Welcome to Wild and Weird Radio, Wild and Weird West Virginia podcast. Tonight, we're entering in to something that we've been teasing for months. It is a work that has been slowly opening up and slowly coming to light publicly over the last 2 years. So brace yourself. It's time for Chapter 1 of Fallen Worlds. Enter the Flood. All right. So tonight it's just me and Ron, and we are hitting it with the very first chapter, really, in the Fallen Worlds saga.
Well, it is a saga, isn't it? It's kind of turned into taking a life of its own.
This is a project for those of you guys who've been following us at Wild and Weird. It has been ongoing now for 2.5 years. Some of you have seen the write-ups and the articles that we've put out, but for the most part, some of the information that we're going to cover with you guys tonight is new to you information. We haven't disclosed any of this previously on any of our pages yet because we've been waiting for the right time. We were supposed to actually do this at Mothman Festival last month, but as everybody knows, the festival was canceled. So we still wanted to give you guys
a little bit of
Fallen Worlds overview. And it's going to be broken up into chapters, just like the papers and books and stuff will be, and videos, because there's a whole big lot of stuff going along with this. Yeah. But you get to hear it first here on Wild and Weird Radio.
Yeah, this thing kind of took on a life of its own. There's just multiple parts of it, multimedia parts of it that we'll be adding on to as time goes on. You know, we've got many things that we're going to work on with this, and we can't say too much about that, but we can definitely hit it with our podcasts. And it's going to be, kind of like monthly installments or something like that, Think of it as your very own Time Life Mysteries of the Unknown.
Yeah, exactly. We are going to release this information in series. It'll all be in order, but you're going to want to bookmark these episodes so that way if you want one day you can just sit and go through them all and just compile this data into your brain like we have.
Well, this will all go to, if you did that, it's kind of like if you watch the X-Files and you just want to stay with the main story arc, you can go and watch just those episodes. It's kind of like that. Once you put it all together, you're going to have a pretty good overview of what the whole project's all about. So, but yeah, so let's get started, man.
Well, once upon a time, over 1,200 civilizations had a flood. And this is really one of the most controversial things out there because everybody always relates the flood to Noah's flood, or Gilgamesh, the Epic of Gilgamesh. And those are two of the big main ones, but it's such a contentious topic because of the religious backgrounds, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You get all these science people that are like, no, religion, brr, arg. But
it's true, yeah.
You can't avoid some of this stuff, especially now. And I'm going to be honest, okay? If you've listened to my backstory, I was a minister for roughly 15 years, ballpark. And I always viewed the story of Noah's Ark as kind of a parable, not a historical telling of actual events. And really until the last 2 years.
That could be my fault, possibly. Maybe.
And, you aided in it, that's for sure. But when I started going down the research hole on this, it really...
You can't deny it, can you? Once you look at the actual evidence.
You can't. And,
you can't deny it.
Like I said, I was a minister, and I thought that the story of Noah and the Ark and the flood was...
And a lot of people think that.
Was a parable because it was only told verbally for ages, It wasn't actually written down into actual text, I don't believe, until Moses wrote it down.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it might have been Abraham. It's late.
It is late.
But it was a while between the two before it was actually written down on a scroll and became a non-verbal tradition, because it was one of those things where they would sit around the temple and tell the story of Noah's Ark and the flood and how it was this all-encompassing flood.
Mm-hmm.
And, my logical mind was like, well, no, you can't really have a flood that covers the whole globe and not have physical signs of it, because that was everybody's main argument, right?
Oh, yeah.
But then we started finding physical signs of it in geology. I remember the very first time that I thought that this was plausible was in a geology class that I had whenever I was in college, because at one point in time I was very interested in geology, and I was actually thinking about minoring in geology. And so I took several geology courses at Marshall University, and we were watching a documentary in class about strata layers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was this one area, I believe it's up in Ireland is where it's at. It's Ireland or one of the English Isles, right? And there's this plateau that just drops off into the ocean, and you can see the strata layers in the hillside. Well, they found out that this string of layers of sedimentary rock that they once thought were laid over, eons of time, were actually something that occurred rapidly,
Mm-hmm.
something that was probably related to a polar flip,
Mm-hmm.
which would have resulted in massive geologic disruption, volcanic activity, earthquake, seismic activity, liquefaction of layers, because the water moving in around it and getting these Newtonian fluid layers that would just show up and then lock in place. And they found out that the timeline between layer A and I think it was like 8 or 9 layers up was only about 44 days. And they were using that as their way to say that the Earth had experienced some kind of polarized flip, and that there was a ton of activity, and just geology says, look at this sandwich of layers. These occurred very quickly. Most of them are sedimentary. They're silt, mud, ash, stuff that can layer up very quickly, and it was all preserved there in that rock timeline per se. So that was the first time that I really entertained this idea. And I remember sitting at a dinner table with you one night, and I started telling you about this. Well, then you brought up the Hiawatha crater.
Mm-hmm.
And the timelines were kind of matching up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the time that they were assuming that these mixed media layers all compiled was right around this 12,500 year time frame.
Well, there's a magic number, and it has always been somewhere around 10 to 12,000. And
yes.
And it's always there. There are so many places where we saw this in Atlantis. We saw this with Göbekli Tepe. We saw this with. There's so many that we're going to talk about eventually. But this number is always there. Now, why is that number there? The number is there because I believe that is an actual, basically a reset date for humanity, in lack of better words. Something definitely happened. And it didn't just happen, in the Middle East. It didn't just happen in Europe. It didn't just happen. It happened everywhere. I mean, just in North America, there are so many different nations that have stories about a great flood, from Choctaw, Ojibwe, all the way down, Ottawa, Cree. There's just there's a list. There's actually a list in front of me that goes on and on and on. We'll give you these lists as well. Mesoamerica, South America, Inca, Machu Picchu, Musica, Tupi, and then you go into Asia, Sumerian, Mesopotamia, China, India, Korea, Malaysia, Philippines, Thailand. There are over 1,200 different cultures that believe that there was a great flood, or at least a great deluge, or a great catastrophe of some sort.
Now, it's hard hearing that.
Oh yeah,
I get it.
Definitely is.
I was very spiritually minded, and still am very spiritually minded. But even though I was serving in ministry, still didn't wrap my head around this. Okay, so I understand where a lot of you listeners are sitting right now, and like, okay, these guys are nuts. But we're about to give you the data. We're going to give you the facts, really, of what happened in that magic window around 12,500 years ago.
Yeah, and the thing about this is, honestly, it shouldn't challenge anyone's faith at all.
No, not at all.
If anything, it may scare you to know that there's a very good possibility that it is exactly what it was, at least to a degree. But it should also warn you that this is not speculation. This is science that we're going to be talking about. It has happened. It has probably happened many times, and it'll probably happen again. So let's look at some of these accounts.
Well, in the biblical account and the Epic of Gilgamesh account, they're both very similar. So I'll give a general overview of this. You had a very devout man who had a relationship with his creator, who spoke with his creator on a regular basis. And one day the creator, God, gives a warning and says, I need you to build this contraption, build this boat, raft, whatever you want to call it. And it needs to be this big, this wide, this tall, made out of this material, and it needs to be this thick. The walls need to be like, everything was given, like schematics were almost perfect for what you would need for a structure to actually be able to withstand massive waves pulverizing the sides of it and being able to hold up. Because there's going to be rain. Rain is coming, and it is going to cause a great flood and destroy everything. And I want you to take clean and dirty animals alike. Take your family and hop on this boat. Seal yourselves in when the rain starts. Then the rain starts. And then we have this 40-day period of survival, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, Noah sends off a crow at first. And, then sends a dove. And the dove returns with an olive branch, which, it wouldn't have returned without an olive branch if there wasn't land. Like, there had to be a branch sticking up out of the water for it to be able to grab a hold of. So that meant that, things were going to get back to normal soon. This time frame that was given by the Creator God basically lined up. They built their boat, they survived. Now everything's going to be made new. And that is pretty much the synopsis of the Noah's Ark and Gilgamesh stories.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had to basically start over.
Yeah. And, there's actually evidence that says that, I remember growing up, there was two things, two of those weird things that always popped up seemed like in the mid 70s, and that was Bigfoot or Noah's Ark. Well, it's Bermuda
the
Triangle.
quest for Noah's
There's
Ark.
Bermuda
Yeah,
Triangle too. Let's not forget that. But the quest for Noah's Ark, right? And it was a big thing, and all these people always said they found it, blah blah blah. And the one guy, David Allen Deal, he did a lot of research, and he believes that he found where the Ark supposedly came to rest, and then it slid on down a hill, whatnot. But the point is, what they found was a remnants of a city. And they theorized that this was the first city of the survivors who were direct descendants and whatnot. And it was inhabited for thousands of years. For 10,000 years, people would come and bury their dead there. There's a massive cemetery. There's massive graves there because it's sacred ground. They came there for a reason. They found the evidence. The evidence is there of previous structures, of the cities, of the graves. That is there. And the legends are there. So we have to look at it and say, like we do with everything else, it's on the table. Does that stick? I think that sticks. I mean, I think that corroborates the story very well. Because if there was a survivor, if there was someone who did manage to do this, there would be a city. There would be survivors. And his theory is that they took apart the Ark and they built the cities from it. I don't know. Did they? Beats me, but
it would have made sense.
It makes perfect sense. But
one of the things that we were taught in survival school was that if you take whatever materials you have left over from what you were in to build shelters, to build, and they had tons and tons and tons of lumber. So if these dimensions were correct and this is what they really built, they had plenty to build several houses and a temple and whatever else they wanted. So,
yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the whole thing, right? But what's really funny about that? We just read a story from the Far East. We just read something from the Judeo-Christian faith, and I'm going to read something to you that isn't from the Judeo-Christian faith, and I want you to tell me what you think when you hear this. Okay? This time, Soto Kang came to Spider-Woman and said, "There's no use waiting until the thread runs out this time. Something has to be done, lest the people with the song in their hearts are corrupted and killed off too. It will be difficult, with all the destruction going on, for them to gather at the far end of the world where I have designated, but I will help them. Then you will save them when I destroy this world with water." That's from the Hopi. That's how the third world ended. I mean, just a little more detailed. There's more of it than that, but that is how it begins. It ends in water.
So, what could cause all of this water? Because science has constantly said that it's impossible for that much rain to fall over that much time because the weather patterns and everything wouldn't allow for it, which they're 100% right. Under normal conditions, normal circumstances, they're 100% right. Global rain would not occur for as long as it did to cover the land with water.
Oh, it would take longer than 40 days and 40 nights, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, right. It would.
Yeah.
But a sudden and instant catastrophe, something that would be, it is described by astronomers as a world ender, a massive asteroid.
An extinction level event.
Yep.
And that's happened before, right?
Oh yeah, it has happened before, and we have proof of that, and everybody accepts that proof freely. They don't argue it for the most part. They're like, "Oh yeah, that happened. That took out the dinosaurs."
Do you know when I was growing up, though, that wasn't accepted? That was a theory. That was only a theory. Think about that.
Yeah.
Time brings truth to light, is all I'm saying. So what we're saying here today, yeah, exactly. Go ahead.
Now we're standing here and we're looking and we're finding these craters. And Ron was reading the newest article to me earlier. And it stated that there's now been over 50 impact sites discovered that were all related to the same event.
Yes, that could be related to the same event. That's correct.
But even if they weren't all related to the same event, the largest impact crater of them all is named the Hiawatha Crater, and it's up near Iceland. And it is a crater that is 34 kilometers wide. Now, during the near ending of the most recent ice age, the ice shelves came all the way down to just above the West Virginia and Ohio lines.
Mm-hmm. We
had glaciers and sheets of ice that came all the way down that far into the United States. They formed massive lakes as they were melting, and then something happened. Yep. Now, an asteroid impact, just to give you an idea, it raises the temperature to, I believe it is 2,000 Celsius. This massive object comes hurtling through Earth's atmosphere, burning as it's descending, and it strikes the Earth, and it strikes very close to one of our poles. And when it strikes, it instantly breaks apart these massive ice sheets, instantly displaces miles and miles of ocean due to massive and rapid evaporation. So you have all of this water that just poof turned into gas form. This goes with the ice as well, followed up almost immediately by massive tsunamis. Mm-hmm. Now, fragments of this impact have been found as far south as Central Africa.
Yeah.
So that tells you that the impact was up near Iceland. If you look at a globe, bring it up on Google Maps on your phone while you're listening. Hopefully not while you're driving, but when you hit a stoplight.
That would be bad. Don't do that.
When you hit a stoplight, bring up Google Maps and look around and find Iceland, and then drop a pin on right off the coast, and then go drop a pin in the middle of Africa. There were fragments of this meteor, or asteroid really, that have been found all the way in Central Africa. So this massive explosion, massive displacement of water, and then also water that returns instantly into gas. We all know, we've all had 6th grade science, what happens to water when it evaporates and turns into gas form, right?
Yeah.
It goes in, turns into clouds get heavy, and the clouds will dump that rain, right? So we have this massive swath of ice and water that just instantly vaporized, followed by massive tsunamis. Now, like Ron was reading earlier, possibly up to 50 of these. They called it, what'd you say they called it, Ron?
In Europe, it's called the Ucelo Horizon, and in North America, it's called the Clovis layer. And we'll talk about the layer when you go there, because that's pretty fascinating.
And so with that event, we have this sudden change in environment. Suddenly, water's everywhere.
Yeah.
This asteroid struck us at such a point.
Well, don't forget, it set fire to everything too first.
Yeah, it did. It set fire to everything.
Yeah.
Else.
This is how we found the proof of this thing. Okay, was that layer. That's how we found the proof of this, the Ucelo layer or the Clovis layer. And we discussed why the Clovis people were so, why did technology seem to stop? Well, this is probably why. So it's called the Clovis layer in North America, and that the reason is that they found evidence of impact event concentration of soot previously utilized to estimate the global amount of biomass burned. This is the global mass, okay? Similar measurements suggest that wildfires at the Younger Dryas onset rapidly consumed 10 million square kilometers of Earth's surface, 9% of the Earth's biomass.
And that's in an instant.
That's like instant.
That's like when you strike a match on the striking board. That's what it went up like. And then
that just gives
suddenly,
you cold chills. If that doesn't give you cold chills, I mean, if you think about that 1 second, 9% of the Earth biomass was incinerated to ash within just an instant.
Blink of an eye.
Yep. So there's your heat.
Big white flash, and then everything's toast.
How big was the white flash? Let me tell you how big the white flash they think the big white flash would have been. The one that killed the dinosaurs, 12 billion times the bomb we dropped on Hiroshima. This was bigger than that.
Massive. Absolute massive.
So this is Earth at that point. And if you can imagine, this is happening all around the world. These things are raining down, as the Earth's turning.
Well, to kind of give you a picture, before we jump on this part, to give you a picture, we most recently watched this kind of an event happen with Jupiter.
Oh, yeah. Great example. Beautiful example.
Where an asteroid was going into Jupiter and broke up.
That's right.
And subsequently struck.
Did you happen to see it, by the way?
Yes.
Back when it was in 1992, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah.
I remember we watched it. I was in elementary school, but we watched it on the laser disc.
Yeah.
If that dates it right there.
I was out in the backyard with my scope, obviously, and I watched this, and to look at the planet, and I could see it pretty good. You could see this.
Jupiter is very visible.
And Jupiter is very visible, and it was really visible in my refractor. You could see this bright white, dot. And if you think about that, that was bigger than the Earth, guys.
Yeah.
I mean, so anyway, what happened, for those who don't know, when this comet was discovered, it was coming in, and it was a comet, and it was going to go around the sun, et cetera, right? Well, no, that's not what happens. As it gets closer to Jupiter, it gets pulled apart, and it gets turned into this, they called it a string of pearls, I believe is what they call it. And it was this massive fleet of asteroids, basically, is what it turned into. It was a comet, but, same thing. It's made of different material, but it's still going to cause massive devastation. Well, this thing just bombards into Jupiter. I mean, and boom, 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 boom. As the planet's spinning, it's just like a rapid fire weapon, hitting this thing. And that's what happened here, guys. Something like that. So we know that these things hit other planets, and that's what Shoemaker Levy 9 showed us, was that, we knew it before. I mean, we saw the moon. The moon is full of craters, right? I mean, Mars, craters everywhere, craters. But we had never seen it with our own eyes. We'd never seen a planet get bombarded. Well, at that point, everyone kind of woke up here on Earth and said, well, this could happen here. Surprise, it has. And they immediately began taking it a little bit more serious in the past few years. There was a few exercises that they started, I believe. There have been several missions with mission goals at NASA. One of them was the DART mission, and that one is supposed to be monitoring. What was the name of it? Do you remember the mission for it exactly? Look that up.
No, I can't remember the name of it right offhand.
It is okay. It was NASA's first asteroid deflection mission. That's what it was.
Okay.
And yeah, that was in 2017 actually, and here we are now in 2020. So, these things have been planned. In the event that Earth does get clobbered at some point, there's a good chance that we might have some kind of defense this time against something like that. I don't know,
and it all just harkens back to the watching the skies.
It really does, doesn't it? Just like
it's just
like
now
said,
we're using
watch the skies.
Better technology. We're not using rocks stacked on top of one another.
Yeah. But we do. We do. We need to be vigilant. We need to watch the skies. We need to learn from our past. Whether we believe every myth, whether we believe everything that's told, all the tales, it doesn't matter. Something actually happened out there. I don't think we can deny that. And it points to the fact that it could happen again. And if it does, what's going to happen here to humanity?
Well, I think we've already seen that play out one time already.
Yep.
And as long as it doesn't wipe out the entirety of man, then there will be a rebuilding.
Yeah. Well, we know this because there are actually contingencies for, the seed bank,
Yeah.
we have that in several places, actually. It's not just in the one up in, was that Greenland,
Antarctica.
right? Antarctica, sorry.
Yeah, Greenland, that's where it was, yeah.
Is it?
Greenland.
I don't know. I'm just remembering this off the top of my head.
I'm pretty sure it might be Greenland. I think we got one on
there's
the
several.
Arctic as well.
There's a bunch of these things now. There's some out in Colorado. They're scattered everywhere. But we're trying to make sure that we survive at some point, or something survives that who knows? Probably going to be half machine by the time it does, but well. But yeah, man, I mean, like you said, we need to keep our eyes watching the skies for sure, because if it happened before, in 10,000 years, you think that's a long time, but it's really not.
It's really not. It's a blink of an eye in the scope of eternity.
Yeah, it's really not that long. And if we went from throwing spears to this in 10,000 years, can you imagine what may have been before?
All right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that is what occurred here. Theoretically, by what we can understand right now with the 50 plus craters that have been found, that are all seeming to be related to this one event.
Or it was your big one.
Yeah.
The big one was a piece of it anyway, regardless. It obviously
that big fragment up in Iceland, that was the largest chunk. The rest of it was just, they were big pieces.
Well, there's also a theory that it blew apart in the atmosphere.
So,
you could have
upper atmospheric explosion.
Yep, upper atmospheric explosion. And, then pieces went back up into the atmosphere and fell back down all across the world, But it doesn't matter. The point is, it happened. And it was a massive, massive catastrophe. And anything that was alive at that time, that was the end of the world, guys.
Yeah.
That was it. It was over.
If you were anywhere near those impact zones.
And by anywhere, you mean where exactly?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for real. All right. I mean, I'm not joking. I'm saying anything, because these things the impact zones have been found down into Africa.
Yep.
So it just depended on where the mass of this hit, and I think you're pretty close to where you called it there. I believe that that crater is probably one of the mass sections that did cause.
I'm fairly certain that was probably the big chunk.
Yeah.
But it totally decimated everything.
It's amazing.
We have, like Ron said earlier, instant incineration. So we have this ash layer, and then the tsunami coming back in from the water displacement that's being pushed over land. We have that water. Then we have the steam, and then we have torrential downpours.
We got volcanoes. Let's not forget those, because that would, this would really cause instability on planet Earth.
This would cause tons of seismic and geologic activity, like absolutely astounding geologic activity that would blow your mind. It'd be unprecedented compared to what we see today. We see these volcanoes erupting in Hawaii, but I mean, we're talking island builders would be erupting at this point and making landmass at volume.
That would be.
Because you have something that would push. Imagine if you filled a balloon full of Jello, and you have holes poked all over this balloon, but the Jello on the inside is firm and solid. It's not going to come out of those holes, right? But if you apply pressure to a point in that balloon, it's going to cause a displacement of that Jello on the inside, and it will push the Jello out of the holes that were once, non-erupting, if you will. It'll begin to push this magma or Jello out of these holes, which would have created archipelagos. It would have created all these things pretty much overnight. The origin of some of these island chains occurring simultaneously at a very rapid pace.
Don't they believe that this is what this was the event that killed off basically the mammoths as well?
Well,
That's one of the
couple of the mammoth
propositions.
species. Humans
Yeah.
were responsible for the
Well,
rest.
yeah. But the big guys, isn't this the one
The
that kind of?
stegodon.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah, they believe that
The
this probably took
Pliocene,
out the
the
stegodon.
megafauna, right? The megafauna. This is what did
Yep.
in the megafauna. So, yeah, which is just okay. Makes sense to me. Now, here's my question for you. If we look at the evidence, and I'm going to read one bit of the evidence for you. The evidence is given by the proponents of the bolide or meteorite impact event include black mats, strata, organic rich soil, we've talked about that have been identified at dozens of points. Clovis culture archaeological sites in North America. They've actually found the material at the Clovis sites in North America. And proponents have reported material including nanodiamonds, metallic microspherules, carbon spherules, magnetic spherules, in my favorite, iridium, platinum. Now, there's other stuff too, but when we sit those two right there, when you find iridium and platinum, you're looking at evidence of an impact event at that point. It doesn't matter. So we've always wondered what exactly happened that, to the Clovis culture. If anyone who really looks at arrowheads or makes arrowheads, is into paleo art, I am. Surprise. If you look at it, you see how they changed. And it's like, they went from this certain type to a completely different type. I mean, we're talking apples and oranges.
Yeah.
Well, some always thought, well, that's because the megafauna died off and they didn't need huge Clovis points and blah, blah, blah. But no, there was more to it than that. There was a whole technology that was completely gone, which is interesting to me because if we look at some of the other parts of the legends as to what this could have all been about, we hear things like the gods were angry with humans and they destroyed humanity. Okay. And that's, again, I'm not talking about how the Judeo-Christian,
Well,
concept.
no, even that was with the Judeo-Christian stuff too. I mean,
yes, it was.
God was displeased with mankind because they were rebellious and
That's right.
didn't, follow any kind of order, and they rebelled against God, therefore smited.
Yeah, smited, right? And you get that a lot, apparently. If you go and look at a lot of these flood myths, you're going to see that a lot of the flood was considered by most of these actually, to be some kind of divine punishment. So
A divine judgment.
A judgment. Sorry, not punishment. Punishment is different.
It was a divine judgment.
Divine judgment. I agree with you on that. And, the sin of which they were being punished for, apparently, was to wipe out something that was here before. Is that correct? I mean, in the assumption?
In some of the assumptions, yes. It was either to wipe out something that was here before or something that was sinful or unclean in nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So did our ancestors in 1,200 different cultures, did they just make that part up to explain?
Because it all kind of lines up, doesn't it?
Yeah. Doesn't it?
It doesn't matter which faith you're a part of.
It really doesn't.
What viewpoints you might have. There's 1,200 and some odd cultures that share that same thought process.
Mm-hmm.
Even though you differ on so many other fundamental levels, there's that one shared event.
Yeah. And it was recorded and recorded and recorded. And, and not just recorded on walls that we have to translate, but, Plato talked about Atlantis and the Golden Age, and he hinted to the fact that, this was a real thing. And, people actually, they kind of think Plato was a smart guy, right? So
yeah, there's there
are those people who believe
schools
that.
of thought.
I think there was, yeah. But no, for real. I mean, so we can't just, because we don't like it. We can't not look at it. We talked about this so many times with other bits of evidence. But, in Plato's time, it was 9,600 years, guys. That was 9,600 years after the fall of Atlantis. Think about it.
So we've talked about the similarities of the cultures. We've talked about some of these impact sites, and we talked about the physical way that a flood could have and likely, has been proven to actually have occurred. Mm-hmm. It is more of a reality now than a spiritual concept. What kind of stuff do we have that predates based on carbon dating and some other things? What are some of the remnant that we can see today that are left over or could have been left over from before or shortly after the world ender?
Well, my favorite one would be Göbekli Tepe. Straight up.
It's up there, man.
It's up there, and it's got a lot of weird stuff attached to it, just in the simple fact that there are some who believe that there is an inscription there that actually talks about an impact. That's on the vulture stone, I believe, is what that was. You can look that up. We're not going to go into that. We could do a whole episode just on the vulture stone alone, the interpretations of it. But it's definitely one of those ones. And if we look at these ancient sites like out west, and they were always there's these spirals of light, and all these things they gather together on certain, like the solstice and whatnot, and they make sure that there's this alignment that takes place. Well, did you ever wonder why they were making sure the alignments take place? I think that they were watching for any disruption in those alignments.
Yeah,
like at all. That would signal
anything that showed up out of place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anything that was out of place, because it had happened before. And they knew it had happened before. We just simply forgot. I think is it Graham Hancock who always says that we're like a civilization with amnesia, something like that?
Yes, that is Graham Hancock that says
there
that.
There could not be a better quote when it comes to humanity, as far as I'm concerned. There's been something here before us. There's too much evidence that says there wasn't something here before us. And it is an absolute mystery. We look at it, we see it, and we see these enigmas in stone, and we sit there and we think, ancient aliens. We think, gods. We think maybe they're the same. I don't know. We just think all these different things because we have no idea. Well, we have clues to it, and those clues do kind of point in the direction that something. Again, we will just use deductive reasoning. We will say it with deductive reasoning. Something hit this planet. I don't know why something hit this planet. If people did survive, and if there are 1,200 myths out there that say that people did survive, that certain people survived, that they were selected.
A remnant.
Remnants, survivors. Who selected those people and why and how? Now, this is a very, very sticky place, isn't it? Because now you have drawn into this. You've come into religion. You've come into ancient astronaut theory. You've come into all that. And I don't think that you can't. Again, we have to put everything on the table. So we have to kind of look at that. And I think the best thing to look at that is what we, what current beliefs in the phenomena say, and that is that humanity may have been wiped out before because there was a what would you call it?
Impurities.
There you go, an impurity in the gene pool. Yeah, because there was an impurity in the gene pool. And what impurities were those, Joe?
Well, those impurities are the next chapter.
Yeah. Do we have any evidence for those impurities? I mean,
we have a lot of evidence for
don't we?
What these
things were. I'm going to read one bit of that supposed evidence for you. So we're going to go back to the possibility of, like you said, there was impurities in the gene pool, and where those impurities came from, we're going to go back to what we talked about in a recent episode, and that was
Enoch.
Enoch, yes.
And the Watchers.
And the Watchers. And do we have any evidence other than the Bible for that kind of stuff? And that's what a lot of people are saying. They're like, oh, that's religion. There's no evidence to that. Well, in 1869, an archaeologist by the name of Sir Charles Warren actually went to Mount Hermon, and he did find the evidence, and he found a stela. And on that stela, according to what was translated, it reads, according to the command of the great and holy God, those who take an oath proceed from here.
I've got to really recommend that if you haven't looked at the Book of Enoch, take a look.
Yeah, it's a life changer. It actually opens your eyes a lot to the
and this is a book that Jesus actually quoted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Jesus quotes the Book of Enoch.
Yeah, it was man who actually took it away, not Jesus. Just so you know.
So this isn't a book that is deemed unholy because Christ used it in his own teachings.
But that was because of the early church and
it was because it got too weird.
It did. It's very wild and it's very weird, isn't it?
To put it mildly.
Enoch was a cool guy. I mean, I think about like anyone from back. Wouldn't it be cool to hang out with him?
Oh yeah, he would be the guy that I would want to hang out with. Most at the top of my list, he would be.
He's up there.
One of the guys because his relationship with.
Oh yeah.
His creator.
Yeah, right. The whole universe, everything. Like this guy, like for whatever reason, he just knew it all. Can't wait to do an episode on Enoch.
Yeah, that'll be a good one.
It'll be a great one.
So. The impurity is spoken about in the Book of Enoch. And it was when the Watchers came down and they saw the daughters of man and fell in love with them and had children with them. And these children were what became called the Nephilim. Now, the term giants is used, it's translated into English, but it doesn't always mean of massive stature. It also talks, the word that is used in Aramaic was also the word that you would use for somebody who had abilities.
Great power.
So they could do things that other people couldn't. They had these I guess you'll call them supernatural abilities because the Watchers themselves would have been of a supernatural origin. So they could do things that other men couldn't. And some of these, one that is later listed, is Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the story of David and Goliath. If you haven't learned it from going to Sunday school and you've seen the old artwork, the historic artwork and the sculptures of David holding the head of Goliath up, that was this massive 10-foot tall man, and he had brothers and they were all like him, and they were also apparently other places.
Oh yeah, a lot of other places, right?
Chapter 2 is titled Chasing Giants.
Yeah, Chasing Giants.
That's really where this whole story started to begin with.
It really is. Yeah, it all started from that, and it's like, well, how does this relate to this? And then all of a sudden, it just this massive road work just laid out pretty much. But yeah, it's an amazing story. The whole thing is an amazing story. If you really look at it, there's definitely evidence of a great flood. These people, in my opinion, did not just simply make this stuff up. If we believe them on the account of the flood, we have to now. Then we have to look at the possibility that what they are saying, particularly about the rest of this story, which will be the stela that was discovered on Mount Hermon, which, by the way, if you're not familiar, is the place where the Watchers descended.
Yep, Mount Hermon is a very sacred place.
Mm-hmm. That is where they descended and took their oath and decided to rebel, and that is where the fall, as it has come to be known, began. And so that is where our story ends this time. But until Chasing Giants, which we'll get to that eventually, we're gonna put these in there from time to time, and in the end, you'll have a really cool thing to listen to. Might learn something.
And stay tuned, because there's going to be videos that go along with these as well. Again, those are probably going to be a later production, but you'll get them, and you might hear some of this stuff out on the road too. So, until next time, you're left to ponder. Did the Egyptians just stroll up on the pyramids and find them, and they were already there and just decided to use them? Was the Sphinx once upon a time setting on a riverbank where the water went along its sides and caused horizontal water erosion? Are all of these flood myths somehow tied together? If you noticed, I dropped you a couple Easter eggs, kids. So till next time, stay wild and weird. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you've all enjoyed the first chapter of Fallen Worlds. And if you really want to catch up on older episodes, go ahead and head on over to wildandweirdwv.com. Click that podcast link. You'll have access to our entire backlog, and you can go listen to your heart's content. If you're listening on your phone or mobile device, go ahead and give us that subscribe button. Smash it now, as hard as you can. Do it right now. Stop what you're doing. Just hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple iTunes, go give us a review and a 5-star rating. That'd be great. We'd really appreciate it. If you want to help support the show, you can head on over to wildandweirdwv.com and hit that store tab. It's going to open up all of the various places that you can pick up your Wild and Weird merch and help support everything that goes on here at Wild and Weird and keep this show free for eons to come.
Thousands of years.
Never know. Yeah.
Thousands.
That to get you through to the next flood at least.
Right.
So, until next time, guys, stay wild and weird.